Ms. Wilford, if you wouldn't mind just confirming the live stream's begun before we begin.
Certainly, just give us one moment. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that our live streaming is on and the recording is on. You may begin your meeting.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Leach. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Assistant Committee Adjustment Secretary Treasurer, Ms. Sarah Leach, please begin this hearing by reciting the Town of Pelham Land Recognition Statement.
Yes, thank you. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and the friendship of the Indigenous people. Through Mr. Chair, you may proceed with your introduction.
Thank you very much. To those who are watching this meeting, this is a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands. Agencies commenting on applications may request that certain conditions be imposed should an application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given the opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this hearing. All interested parties are invited to be present. Copies of the decision will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. And there aren't colored forms, but what we'll ask you to do is contact the clerk's department. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. Our panel today includes myself, Donald Cook. I'll be acting as chair. Mr. John Clausen. Here. Mrs. Sandra Marsh.
Here.
Staff present from the Town of Pelham include Ms. Sarah Leach, the Assistant Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, and also Ms. Jackie Miller, who is the Legislative Coordinator for the clerks, and she'll be running the technology for this meeting. I also saw earlier that our clerk, who is also the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, appears to be in attendance helping Ms. Miller. With that being said, we're going to start with our first, better go with the pecuniary information. Does any member of this panel have a pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act in any of the applications being considered at this hearing?
I do not.
I have none.
And neither do I. The first file we'll be dealing with today is file A17/222P. The property is located at 855 20 Road in the Town of Pelham. Assistant Secretary Treasurer Leach, would you please read a summary of the presentation for this application?
Yes, absolutely. Committee of Adjustment hearing Tuesday, December 6th at 4 p.m. All Town of Pelham in-person Committee of Adjustment hearings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all Committee of Adjustment hearings electronically via Zoom. No decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Participants are reminded, please ensure your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will also not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by the committee, your microphone will be muted. Once voting on an item has taken place, participants will be removed from the meeting completely. You may resume viewing the meeting via live stream. The Zoom chat is not monitored nor recommended to contact the clerk's department. Please contact us via email at clerks@pelham.ca. This email address will be monitored during the meeting. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you'll be given an opportunity to address the committee at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please email clerks@pelham.ca. Please note that all comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will also not be tolerated. If decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given the opportunity to speak to the committee during the public portion of the meeting. Please note that after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant and/or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments and concerns at one time. File A17, 855 20 Road. The subject land is located on the north side of 20 Road, legally described above and known locally as 855 20 Road. The minor variance application requests relief from section 7.4C, maximum lot coverage, requesting a maximum lot coverage of 14.33%, whereas the maximum lot coverage of 10% is permitted. The variance application also requests relief from section 7.7C, maximum lot coverage, requesting a maximum lot coverage of 3.79% for accessory structures, whereas a max lot coverage of 1% is permitted for accessory structures. To date, the following comments have been received from the Building Division, C conditions. Public Works has no comments. Niagara Region, Regional Planning and Development staff are not opposed to the proposed minor variance, provided that the accessory structure does not contain any additional fixture units or living space. Town staff should be satisfied that all local requirements and provisions are met. NPCA staff do not offer objection to the proposal. The NPCA regulation mapping illustrates that the subject land contained locally significant wetland and 30-meter buffer associated with the upper 16-mile creek wetland complex. NPCA policy generally restricts development and site alteration within the wetland feature and within the 30 meters from the wetland edge. Provided the applicant does not locate the replacement structure closer to the wetland boundary, NPCA staff would not have an objection to the approval of the minor variance. Please note that an NPCA works permit and an updated site plan noting the location of erosion and sediment controls will be required prior to commencement of works on site. Members of the public, we did receive one public comment. Concerns with site plan lot lines compared to survey, recommends the completion of a survey and drainage plan. Minor variance test number 1, is the variance minor in nature? Yes, the increased lot coverage on the subject property and adjacent properties is minimal given the lot context. The negative impacts are anticipated on the adjacent properties as adequate distance separates the nearest residential neighbor from the location of the addition of the accessory structure. Yard setbacks will be maintained. The accessory structure is set back from street view, and the scale and massing have been designed to retain its use and status as secondary or incremental to the primary residential building. The remaining lot area remains available to handle stormwater runoff, the existing septic system, and preserve a rear yard amenity area. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? Yes. The increase in lot coverage is desirable as it will permit design flexibility for an addition to an existing accessory structure while maintaining adequate rear yard amenity area. The new location of the structure will have a lesser impact on the floodplain and will be set back further from locally significant wetlands than compared to the location of the existing accessory structure, which is an overall site improvement from a hazard land and natural heritage perspective. The requested variance is not anticipated to have any negative impacts on the streetscape. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Yes, the requested increase in coverage is minor and allows for the logical and appropriate placement of an accessory structure. The increase in lot coverage for accessory structures is not anticipated to have any negative impact on space for landscaping, leisure, or drainage. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The requested lot coverage should have no impact on the agricultural viability of the surrounding area and will not compromise the objectives of the official plan with respect to land use and compatibility, stormwater runoff, and private sewage system servicing capabilities. The proposal is generally consistent in built form, scale, massing, with existing development and the character of the area. Planning staff of the opinion that the proposal makes sufficient use of the land, will not result in the overbuilding of the property, will not alter the view, sightlines, or personal enjoyment of the subject property or neighboring properties, and should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regard to land use and compatibility, traffic and privacy, and stormwater runoff. They're also of the opinion that it minimizes the impact on the floodplain. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that file number A17/2022P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant apply for and receive a building and a demolition permit for the proposed detached garage. No plumbing or additional living space be installed within the proposed garage. That the applicant apply for and receive an NPCA work permit for work in the floodplain and update the site plan drawing illustrating the location of erosion and sediment controls prior to any site work being undertaken. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision for this file, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Holly Wilford, Secretary Treasurer to the Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, PO Box 400, Fonthill, Ontario, hwilford@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Is the applicant or a representative available to join our meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm just bringing in the applicant and the agent now. Tonight we have Mr. Farrow, the applicant, and Mr. DeRose, the agent.
Are we?
I'm here. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Following what was read, I believe that we moved the new garage outside of the floodplain, and the sizes of the building is very minor and increased in size, and we're hoping that you'd have positive consideration in the situation.
Thank you, Mr. DeRose. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to make a comment on this application? Do we have anyone?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have any pre-registered speakers. However, I will just check the email address. One moment. I can confirm that it is 4:14 p.m. and we've received no emails. You may close the public portion and move to committee input.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Leach. I'd like to have a motion to close the public portion of the meeting regarding this application. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor of closing the public portion of the meeting? Carried. Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions you wish to ask Mr. DeRose or the applicant? Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I just, to the applicant or the agent, just wanted a little bit more clarification as to what the concerns exactly were from the neighbor. They were talking about a survey and drainage. So I just wanted a little bit more clarification since the neighbor isn't in the meeting today.
The neighbor's property is quite a long distance away from the subject property, and there's quite a valley. It must be at least a 30-foot valley between the two properties, or between the two houses, we'll say, 30 or maybe 40 feet deep. So there is no drainage issue that I could see. I'm a professional engineer, and I could speak to that there would be no drainage problems in that regard or flooding problems at all. Other than that, I don't really see any problem. They're quite a distance apart from each other, housing-wise. We almost say a city block away.
Through the
Senator,
chair.
if I can comment,
Yes,
the boundary issue is more through the chair. I'm sorry, Don.
Yes.
The boundary issue is more of an ongoing boundary issue we have with them. And the back lot is, I don't know how far we are. Like, we moved the garage. It's an old barn that we're taking down before it falls down, basically. And we've had the municipality out to look at it prior to going through this process to ensure that we could knock it down, because it is deemed, our house is deemed to have historical significance. So we've been through that process to get that kind of green light to go ahead. But what I see of Breyer's comment was more about they want us to do a survey because they have a survey, so they can see where the boundaries are, and we're not disputing. It has nothing to do with this application, frankly, from what I can see, because drainage is so far away from where the garage is that it's really not an issue. And it's the back boundary, not the side boundary that's 3 meters from their property. It's the back boundary, which is, I don't know how many meters. It's a lot further than that for sure. So.
I just want to make one comment. We did find the property bars, so we have set the new garage within the property line. I'm an engineer, and we went out and we surveyed the property, and we found the property bars on the, we'll say, the east neighbor's side yard. So there's no issues as far as placing the building. It's going to be in the right spot when it's built.
And just for the committee's purposes too, when I saw that, I reached out to them and said, look, we're going to be home on Friday. If you'd like to get together and talk about that, well, let's do that. But this really has nothing to do with what's in front of us today.
I have a tendency to agree with you, sir.
Yes, next time.
The application has nothing to do with property. It's basically
No. Yeah.
Size of building.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think there are any members. Do you have any further discussion on this application? Any other concerns, Mrs. Marsh?
I have none.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, I think what the owner next door is saying, regardless of how feelings are in that, he just wants to be sure that the property stakes are clearly outlined and that there's no encroachment or anything like that. I think what the owner, the property neighbor is asking is perfectly normal. So I would ask Mr. DeRose if he has found all the property stakes that he confirmed to the owner that yes, the property stakes are there, and he will take the responsibility that if there's any problems, that he'll handle it. But I can see from the owner's point of view. I've been through that a few times. I can tell you right now, we just had a situation here by our place where the stakes were all there, and I found out they weren't the proper stakes. We had to bring in a surveyor and had the whole property, everything all had to be redone. And it was interesting that the new stakes were quite a bit different than the old ones. So
we're not talking about stakes. We're talking about iron bars. The property corner bars are there on the east side. It's not we didn't put stakes. We found the existing.
Yeah, I'm talking iron bars.
Yes, we found the iron bars.
Yeah, fine. And you're sure they're the correct ones?
Yeah, the owner of the next door property, he was out there at the back, and I showed him the bars. Showed him the corner bars, so he knows that they're there, and we put a wooden stake beside the steel square bar. Those are 4 feet deep. They're 1 inch square bars, and they're 4 feet deep. So they are the originals.
And this building is nowhere near the back boundary.
No, we're,
Like
we're,
nowhere near, I don't know how many meters, it might be 30, 40 meters from the back boundary, so.
yeah.
I'm
Once
not
again-
disputing that. I'm just saying I can understand where the situation is, and quite honestly, I would feel more comfortable if an Ontario land surveyor were to confirm what was found, but
We
I'll leave
did,
it at that.
we did have a survey done by Matthews Cameron about 5 years ago when we were attempting to buy some land from our neighbor to square up the property lines. And he has that, like I've given him everything that we had done, so,
Okay, fine.
yeah.
Okay, members, are we in a position to render a decision on this application? If so, can I have a formal motion regarding this application? Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion that file A17 2022P 85520 Road in Pelham, that the application made for minor variance of maximum lot coverage of 14.33%, maximum lot coverage accessory of 3.79% be granted for the following reasons. The variance is minor in nature as the increase in lot coverage is minimal given the lot context. No negative impacts are anticipated. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the land as it allows flexibility for design. A proposal will be less impactful on the floodplain. This application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham, and the Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the Planning Act test for minor variance conditions, that all necessary building permits are obtained and ensuring no living accommodations or plumbing are within the accessory building, and that prior to building permits, receive all necessary NPCA work permits.
Thank you. Seconder.
I second it.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. All in favor of granting the variance A17? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you're very welcome. Your chairman forgot to do something. He forgot to ask the clerk, the secretary treasurer, if there had been any withdrawals or adjournments before he introduced the first
That's okay.
application.
Since there was not, I did not bother to intervene, but there has not been.
I mentioned that right at the beginning when I said we only have 5. There's one withdrawal.
One withdrawn. And hopefully we may have a new committee before that one has basically comes forward. Anyway, our second application for this evening is application A19 2022P. The property in question is at 13 Arsenal Crescent in the town of Pelham. Do we have the representatives and Assistant Secretary Leach? Can you read the summary reports, please?
Yes, absolutely. The agent, Mr. Haikoops, just joined us, and Ms. Miller will be doing your presentation for you this evening. Let me just share my screen.
Application for minor variance, file A19, 2022P, 13 Arsenal Crescent. Planning report. The subject land is an irregularly shaped parcel located on the west side of Clager Avenue, lying south of Port Robinson Road in the Saffron Meadows Phase 3 subdivision in the town of Pelham. The lot is proposed to be known locally as 13 Arsenal Crescent in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Section 14.2D, maximum front yard, seeking a maximum front yard setback of 8.5 meters to the dwelling front face, whereas a maximum of 5.5 meter setback is required. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Division, C condition. Public Works Department, please be advised that no side yard walkways that impede side yard swales shall be permitted. Minor variance test 1. Is the variance minor in nature? Yes, there will be no impacts on the streetscape, and there remains sufficient lot area to site the proposed dwelling on the lot. The variance is necessary due to the nature of the lot's irregular pie shape. The standard zoning provisions of the subdivision's site-specific zoning do not enable the the siting of the proposed dwelling on a pie-shaped lot where the issue is not present on regular shape rectangular lots. Minor variance test 2. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of land? The requested variance seeks to increase the maximum front yard setback to the face of a dwelling. The standard zoning provisions of the subdivision's site-specific zoning do not enable the sitting of the proposed dwelling to provide for a straight driveway. The variance is necessary to push the face of the dwelling further back to be able to provide for a straight driveway. The increased setback will maintain the original intent of the building design. Minor variance test 3. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The requested variance seeks to increase the maximum front yard setback to the face of a dwelling. The intent of the maximum front yard setback is to enhance the streetscape through encouraging shallower front yard setbacks. Shallow front yards are intended to facilitate compact built form, increase safety through traffic calming and framing of the street, provide for eyes on the street, and facilitate a human scale development. Further, it is the intent of the maximum front yard setback to ensure the face of the dwelling projects past the garage. As the subject parcel is pie-shaped, the maximum front yard setback poses challenges for the sitting of the proposed dwelling and driveway. A larger setback is required for the appropriate function of the driveway and to ensure the garage is set back further than the dwelling face. The increased front yard setback will maintain adequate side yard setbacks. Minor variance test 4. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? Yes. The intent of the East Fawn Hill Secondary Plan Area, low density residential, this designation to promote the development of complete communities through providing a range and mix of housing options, providing for access to neighborhood retail stores, and pedestrian-oriented street design. The proposed minor variance does not compromise these objectives. The intended streetscape of the low-density designation is maintained. Planning staff are of the opinion the proposal makes efficient use of the land, will not result in overbuilding of the property, will not alter the view, sightlines, or personal enjoyment of the subject property or any neighboring properties, and should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to land use and compatibility, traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application A19-2022P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant apply for and receive a building permit for the proposed dwelling. Town of Pelham Public Works staff require that the applicant submit an overall lot grading and drainage plan to demonstrate that the drainage does not negatively impact nor rely on neighboring properties. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Holly Wilford, Secretary Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fond Hill, Ontario, LOS 1EO hwilford@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Representatives of the applicant, are they available for questions?
Yes, we have Mr. Heikoop in the meeting with us.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you again tonight.
Nice to see you, Mr. Heikoop. I must admit, I had a little difficulty finding the property. It's kind of a wet open field still at the moment, and Klager Street has not yet been punched through. So other than that, do you agree with the planning report?
Yes, I've reviewed the report and agree with its conclusions. Certainly here for any questions the committee members may have.
My next thing, do we have any members of the public going to speak to this application?
To you, Mr. Chair, we do not, but I will just check the clerks@pelham.ca email address.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions to ask of Mr. Heikoop with this particular application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that we've received no emails. It is 4:30 p.m. and you may move to committee input.
Well, I guess I better have a motion to go into committee. So do I have a motion to end the public portion of the meeting? The mover, please.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. Mr. Clausen, I'm sure you'll be happy to second this one.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. All in favor of closing the public portion of the meeting? Carried. Thank you very much. Members of the committee, you have any questions you want to ask of Mr. Heikoop on this? Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I just have a question. With this house being essentially pushed back in the yard, does that allow for increased vehicles to be allowed to be parked in the driveway? Because I know in these new subdivisions, they're generally only one side of the street parking, and often just with the smaller front yards, it's difficult to find places to park your car in these types of subdivisions. So is there additional parking will be allowed in the driveway, like as opposed to if it was in compliance with the current setbacks?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member. So the existing requirement is a minimum front yard setback to the garage of 6 meters. With this proposed change to increase the maximum front yard setback, it would push the garage to approximately 8.18 meters or 8.2 meters from that front property line. It is conceivable that you would be able to fit 2 cars between the back of curb and the garage, but that's not really part of the thought process going into this request. This request is really founded on the geometry, the shape of the lot 10 of the property. We've got a builder, Rinaldi Homes, who's looking at constructing a dwelling on the property that's just over 30 feet, I believe 31 feet 8 inches wide. And because it's a pie-shaped lot, it becomes quite narrow at the front of the property. So in order to make that house design work kind of within the parameters, that's why we've requested this variance, in order to push that back so we can keep the house square, can keep the driveway straight going in. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
And it also helps your side yard setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mr. Clausen.
I'm looking at the rear setback. I'm looking at their drawing. They show covered deck and everything. Is there going to be a problem, especially if they put a covered deck? Are they going to have to come back for another minor variance for the back setback?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. The covered deck has a setback minimum 4.5 meters. The way the design's been done is a setback to the covered deck at 7.38 meters. So we've got about 10 extra feet of space beyond the requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions from members of the committee? There are no further questions. I guess we're ready to render a decision. If so, could I please have a formal motion on this application?
I'd like to move that we grant the minor variance. And for the following reason, the variance is minor in nature, as there will be no impact on streetscape, and the lot is sufficient for the proposed building. The intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the land, and it allows for a straight driveway. It solves a number of problems. Makes sense. This application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. There were no objections received from commenting agencies or budding property owners. The Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the Planning Act test for minor variance. The applicant is aware that no side yard walkways that impede side yard soil shall be permitted. That's in it. The other condition is obtain all the necessary building permits, and prior to building permit, just submit a drainage plan to the satisfaction of Director of Public Works. So I move.
Seconder, please. Mrs. Marsh seconded. All in favor of granting this application? Carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Haiku, we're off and flying.
Mr. Haiku will be staying with us for the next applications as well. For clarity, I will be hearing B7 and B8 concurrently.
Okay, our next application is a conveyance application. I believe it is B7, and I think we might as well do B8 at the same time concurrently. The properties are at 112 Line Avenue, B7, and B8 slash 2022P is at 114 Line Avenue. Now, Miss Leach or Miss Miller, Mrs. Miller, who's reading the?
I will be taking care of this one.
Thank you, Miss Leach. Please proceed.
Excellent, and you can see my presentation, correct?
Not yet.
No. Give that a try.
Yeah. There we go.
Excellent. Okay, applications for consent file B7 2022P and B8 2022P. The subject parcels of land known locally as 1112 and 1114 Line Avenue in the town of Pelham. Applications are made for consent. For consent to sever 2242.3 square meters of land being part 3 and 1626.5 square meters of land being part 1 to be added to the abutting property to the west, part 5, for future development as part of the Tanner extension lands. Part 2 and 4 are to be retained for the continued residential use of the dwellings 1112 and 1114 Line Avenue. To date, the following comments have been received. From the building department, no comments. From Public Works, please note Part 2 of 59R6922 is subject to right-of-way. As per town standard, no structures can be built on a town right-of-way. Please note a 3-meter easement dedicated to the town for future pedestrian walkway connection to Line Avenue. Town staff will require a comprehensive lot grading and drainage plan demonstrating that stormwater runoff does not negatively impact nor rely upon neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Niagara region, the properties are adjacent to the Regional Core Natural Heritage System consisting of significant woodland. Staff offered no objection to the proposed consent applications and confirmed that no environmental studies are required in support of it. Consistent with Regional Official Plan Policy 7.B.1.11, an environmental impact study, EIS, will likely be required in support of any future site alteration and/or development proposed on the subject lands to demonstrate that there will be no significant negative impact on the feature or its ecological function. No public comments were received at the time of writing this report. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed consents are consistent with the PPS and conform to provincial, regional, and local plans. The resulting parcels comply with applicable zoning bylaw regulations and should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with respect to traffic, privacy, and stormwater management. A condition of approval for the application as presented at the August 2nd, 2022 Committee of Adjustment hearing was a 3-meter wide pedestrian connection from the future subdivision to Line Avenue through 1112 Line Avenue, as requested by the Town Public Works Department. This condition has been removed as part of the application at the time, as the alignment of the walkway would be better on a future development application on the remnant lands. The removal of the condition does not preclude the provision of the pedestrian connection, as the town has the opportunity to establish the pedestrian connection through future development applications when they are brought forward. Planning staff recommend that application number B7/2022P and B8/2022P be approved, subject to the following conditions: that the applicant ensure Part 3 merges on title with Part 5, that the applicant ensures Part 1 merges on title with Part 5. Town staff will require a comprehensive lot grading and drainage plan for Part 1 and Part 4, demonstrating that stormwater runoff will not negatively impact nor rely upon neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works or their designate. That the applicant provide the Secretary Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcels, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Not the applicant provide the final certification fee of $411 per application payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling these conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. And if you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision for either file, please contact the Secretary Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Holly Wilford, Secretary Treasurer to the Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, PO Box 400, Fawn Hill, Ontario, LOS 1EO, hwilford@pelham.ca.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Leach. Is anybody in the audience present to make it? Actually, it's better ask for the representatives if they want to make a comment on the presentation. Mr. Haiku first, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I have nothing further to add. But as always, if there's any questions or clarifications, I'm certainly willing to answer them. I think this time around we've had some discussions with staff and are all on the same page now. Thanks.
Ms. Leach, has any member of the public given us notice they wish to speak on this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have no pre-registered members of the public, and it is 4:41 p.m. and I can confirm we've received no emails.
Thank you very much. Can we have a motion to close the public portion of the meeting? Thank you, Mrs. Marsh, seconded by Mr. Clausen. All in favor of closing the public portion? Carried. Thank you very much. Committee members, do you have any questions of Mr. Haiku?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sandra.
Through the chair, I just noticed that this application, the applications are to merge Part 3 with Part 5 and to merge Part 1 with Part 5. However, there's nothing for a partial discharge of mortgage, and I just want to confirm that that's not an oversight.
That's a very good point. I think I'm not sure what the implications of that is. You look into that 1 second.
Thank you.
Bear with me if you don't mind.
My apologies. It seems to just have been something that was left out of the presentation. It was applied for and it was circulated on the notice of decision. So my apologies for that.
Okay.
So we're good?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Clausen.
Yeah, that right of way. It's been, the way I understand it, it's been waived now, so there's no right of way. But if they wanted to develop, let's say you get Part 3, 1, 2, 3, and 5, they want to develop it, they can't develop it unless they have that right of way in the future.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. So there is an existing right of way there now. So what has changed is the town originally requested an easement for a pedestrian connection. So one of the things that came to light through this process was that there are 2 existing dwellings, one specifically 1112 Line Avenue, where that right of way exists. So the existing owner doesn't want to sell all of their backyard. They just want to sell a portion of it. So ultimately, if future development applications were to occur, there would be an opportunity to get that pedestrian walkway connection when that existing homeowner at 1112 would sell. So that's a continued development process that would happen sometime in the future when the existing owner is willing to sell more. And the town will always maintain its leverage to establish that walkway connection because they have that existing right of way.
Okay. So just by granting the consent, we won't cause any future problem then?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the right of way right now across that back portion, I take it as part 2 of Plan 59R 6922.
That is correct.
Okay, so there is also currently part 8 on Plan 59R 15420.
Yes, that's an underlying part number, and we have existing draft approval for a plan of subdivision on part 5, and
Okay.
that's something that will be addressed through that process.
So part 1 and 3 are going to be added to part 5, correct? I also thought I heard something about a drainage plan for part 4, parts 1 and 4.
So the report is the conditions for the part, just reading from the staff report here, comprehensive lot grading drainage plan for part 1, that's B8, and then B7 as a comprehensive lot grading and drainage plan for part 4. So the grading plan.
I have difficulty because part 4 is the remnant.
It's a good point. Should be
Part 2 is a remnant.
Correct. It should be part 1 and part 3, the severed portions.
But they're going to be part of a plan of subdivision, so they're going to have a drainage plan prepared anyway. I would say the drainage plans need to be prepared for parts 2 and 4, not 1 and 4. The remnant parcels are going to need a drainage plan. That will also be done at some time in the future.
It's the 2 remnant parcels that we need the drainage plan for.
The remnant parcels, so that would be parts 2 and 4, not 1 and 4.
Correct, yes.
Thank you very much. Glad I caught that one. Okay, so with that being said, unfortunately, my page didn't come up with all the things. Thank you, Mr. Young, for that, for helping us clarify that point. Are there any other comments from the members of the committee on this, noting that these two parcels being severed will become part of a future plan of subdivision, and the remnants may at some time end up with a development agreement of some type on them also. With that being said, are there any questions from the members of the panel?
Not from me, no.
Thank you very much. Are we ready to render a decision on these 2 applications, B7 and B8? Thank Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion that file B7 2022P and B8 2022P 1112 and 1114 Line Avenue in Pelham, that the applications for consent be granted for partial discharge of mortgage, and that merge part 3 with part 5 and merge part 1 with part 5. The above decision is subject to the following conditions: to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works that a lot grading and drainage plan for part 2 and a lot grading and drainage plan for part 4, to the satisfaction of the Secretary Treasurer, part 3 merges with part 5 on sketch, part 1 merges with part 5 on sketch, provide the Secretary Treasurer with the solicitor's written undertaking, registrable legal description, copy of deposited reference plan, and that the final certification fee of $411 be provided. This decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to and complies with the town official plan, regional policy plan, provincial policy statement, town zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard to sections 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act, and the committee considered all written and oral submissions and finds that, subject to the conditions, this application meets Planning Act criteria, is consistent with and complies with provincial, regional, and town planning policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Marker. Second.
I second that.
Mr. Clausen seconds the motion. All in favor of granting applications B7 and B8 for the motion? Thank you very much. Carried. Our next application is B13 2022P. The property in question is at 1399 Station Street in the town of Pelham. Ms. Leach or Ms. Miller, could you please take us through the summary report?
Yes, absolutely. Ms. Miller will be presenting this one, but I will go ahead and share my screen.
Application for consent, file B13 2022P, 1399 Station Street. The subject parcel is an interior parcel of land situated 57.5 meters east of Station Street, lying south of Summersides Boulevard in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to partial discharge of mortgage and consent to convey 1,938 square meters of land, Part 2, to be added to the abutting property to the south, Parts 4 and 5, for a future residential development. Part 1 is to be retained for continued residential use of the dwelling known municipally as 1399 Station Street. Part 3 is proposed to be retained as a residential building. Note, the boundary adjustment will facilitate a future residential development. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Division, no comments. Public Works Department, C conditions. Tree preservation plan will be required. Include trees on lot grading plan. Hydro 1. No comments or concerns at this time. Bell Canada. Subsequent to review of the consent application by our local engineering department, it has been identified that Bell Canada will require a transfer of easement over these lands to protect existing aerial facilities, supply services to the properties, and to maintain service in the area. According to our records, Bell's aerial cable runs through parts 1, 3, and 4 as identified in the sketch. Bell Canada would like to confirm that a blanket easement over the lands or a 3-meter wide corridor to be measured 1.5 meters on either side of the aerial cable, then to extend from the pole to a minimum of 1 meter past any anchor installation to be measured 0.5 meter on either side of the guy as can be accommodated would satisfy our needs. Since the easement is necessary in order to provide and maintain service to this area, all cost associated with this transaction is the responsibility of the landowner. Compensation should be set to the nominal amount of $2 for the acquisition of these rights. Additionally, Bell Canada requires separate registered postponements for any mortgages and certification of title. Rainer Hummel, Hummel Properties, Inc., supports the consent. Express support for the consent facilitating a development that will complement and complete the East Fonthill area. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposed boundary lot adjustment is consistent with the PPS and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. The resulting parcels comply with applicable zoning bylaw regulations and should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with respect to traffic, privacy, and stormwater management. Planning staff recommend that application number B13 2022P be approved subject to the following conditions. That the applicant ensure Part 2 merges on title with Part 5. That the applicant agree to transfer a blanket easement over the lands or a 3-meter wide corridor to be measured 1.5 meter on either side of the aerial bell cable, then to extend from the pole to a minimum of 1 meter past any anchor installation, to be measured 0.5 meter on either side of the guide to Bell Canada. That the applicant confirm that no existing utilities currently cross the proposed new property line. Should any services cross this new property line, the applicant will be responsible for costs associated with their relocation and/or removal. That the existing sheds on Part 2 and crossing into Part 1 will be removed. That the applicant prepare a tree preservation plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. That the Secretary-Treasurer be provided with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. That the final certification fee of $411, note, the fees may increase January 1st, 2023, payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the Secretary-Treasurer in writing as soon as possible. Holly Wilford, Secretary-Treasurer, Committee of Adjustment, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fawn Hill, Ontario, LOS 1EO, H. Wilford at pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found at the Town of Pelham's website.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Can you, Sarah, please let us know if anybody in the audience wishes to comment on this application?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm just bringing in the two agents for this file, Mr. Jim Frank and Mr. Stephen Bedford. You may proceed with their comments.
Gentlemen, do you have any comments you wish to add to the presentation made by Mrs. Miller? Staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Stephen Bedford. I'm the agent on the file. And Jim is here. He's one of the owners on the file. And we've reviewed in detail the report written by staff, very comprehensive. And we're supportive of their comments. And in reviewing the conditions, we do see that condition bullet 2 speaks to an option with respect to the Bell Canada easement. Bell Canada has provided an easement, and either one would satisfy Bell Canada. We would request that the committee approve the 3-meter wide corridor rather than the blanket easement. We would prefer to see only a portion of the property restricted by Bell Canada's easement rather than the whole property. That request, that option has been provided by Bell Canada. We'd like to take that option. Jim, do you have any comments further?
No, other than just the comment regarding the easement is good, and everything else Jackie presented was great. So no, happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Members of the committee, any questions for the gentleman? Mrs. Marsh.
Through the chair, I just to clarify, the application for consent is to merge Part 2 with Part 5 and not, what about Part 4? Is the ownership with Part 4 already with Part 5? Is that correct?
That is correct. So Part 4 is already merged with Part 5.
Okay.
And so this is just for Part 2 to merge with, in theory, Part 4 and 5, but we're calling it Part 5 on this application.
Okay, so like a land assembly, you're just putting all the pieces together of the puzzle. Thank you.
Correct.
I also was going to ask, as I remember doing the conveyance for Part 4. I was just going to ask if that conveyance has actually taken place. It sounds like it has.
It has, yes.
Okay. That being the case, Mr. Clausen, any questions?
Well, I was going to ask the same thing about Part 4, because the drawing I'm looking at says Parts 2 and 4 to merge entitled with Part 5. So already Part 4 has been taken has been done already.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, am I right? What they want is conveyance of a blanket easement. No, they want what they want is a 3-foot wide corridor easement in favor of Bell Canada. Is it correct? They don't want to have an either or. They want just one. Is that correct?
That's what the applicants have stated there.
Yeah, Mr. Bedford
just
there.
want the 3-meter wide easement.
Yeah, so
corridor easement in favor of Bell Canada.
So then, yeah.
Is that,
I just want to be sure
correct
on that.
in what I heard? I just want to make sure, because if we...
That's correct. Yeah, it can be left as either or, but we are going to be proposing that it be a 3-meter easement be put across the back of the property there.
Mr. Chair, the condition is worded as either or. It would be up to the applicant to satisfy that with Bell Canada, so it would not be harmful to keep it as either or unless they want to specifically make that decision right now.
Maybe it might be in your best interest to keep it open, gentlemen, just because we don't always know how Bell Canada works. That would be my suggestion based on previous experience.
Yeah, we have no problem leaving it open-ended, and we can just deal with Bell Canada to do what we want there for the 3 meters.
So as long as we eventually see an easement in favor of Bell Canada, or the Secretary of Treasury sees an easement document in favor of Bell Canada, we'll leave it up to you, gentlemen.
That's correct.
Does that make sense?
I just want to be sure of that, because I could see that being a very contentious issue later. And I think Mr. Bedford's handling it.
Yes, and you know, Mr. Claus, you and I have had issues with some of these utilities in the years gone by in a past life.
I don't blame Mr. Bedford for speaking up.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? If not, we will entertain a motion.
Through Mr. Chair, we do have to close the public portion of this.
Oh, yes. We always have to close the public portion of the meeting. That being said, can I have a mover and a seconder close the public portion?
I move we close the public portion of the meeting.
I will just clarify that we did not have any pre-registered speakers, and we have received no emails, and it is 5:01 p.m.
Okay. And Mrs. Marsh is going to second, and all in favor of closing the public portion carried. I guess any other comments of the members of the committee? If not, I would entertain a motion to regarding this application, B13-222P.
I would move that we grant the motion as read out, where the application for consent is a partial discharge of mortgage where you merge Part 2 with Part 5. And the above decision is subject following conditions. This is where we got to confirm that there are no utilities that cross the proposed lot lines, and that is to the satisfaction of Director of Public Works, and to the satisfaction of Director of Community of Planning and Development, that shed that crosses the line there on Part 2 that be removed, and that they submit a tree preservation plan. And to the satisfaction of Bell Canada, we'll state that either you can have a conveyance of a blanket easement or a 3-foot wide corridor easement in favor of Bell Canada, all costs associated borne by the applicant. So we'll leave it that way. And to the satisfaction of Secretary Treasurer, we merge Part 2 with Part 5 as on the sketch. We provide the Secretary Treasurer solicitor's written undertaking, registrar legal description, and a copy of the deposited reference plan, and that the final certificate fee of $411 be provided as long as there hasn't been a price increase as of January 2023. Maybe you should pay it now and avoid the increase. But anyhow, the decision is based on the following reason. The application conforms to and complies with the town official plan, regional policy plan, and provincial policy statement, town zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regard for sections 51 bracket 24 and 51 bracket 25 of the Planning Act. And there are no objections received from anyone, and the committee considered all written and oral submissions and finds that the subject to the conditions, the application meets Planning Act criteria and is consistent and complies with provincial, regional, and town planning policies. So moved.
Seconded by
second that.
Mrs. Marsh. All
Second.
in favor of granting this application? Carried. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for attending our meeting, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee.
You're very welcome. Our next item of business is approval of some minutes long.
Well, we got to wait till, Don, we want to make sure that there's nobody around. We could be heard, right?
So I've removed our applicants and agents.
We still have the approval of the minutes of the previous meetings. The first, I would like approval of minutes for the meetings of October the 2nd, 2018, October 30th, 2018, and June the 5th, 2019. These are old minutes. I've noticed reading them that Mr. Clausen was involved in a couple, and others that are no longer members of the committee. So, Mr. Clausen, you want to move acceptance of the first three sets of minutes as prepared?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the minutes.
And I will second that. The minutes of October the 2nd, 2018, October 30th, 2018, June 5th, 2018, be ratified as prepared. The next batch of minutes we have is the minutes of October the 4th, 2022. And let me see, I forget who are the naughty people on that one. Oh, I think that was, well, okay, wouldn't you know what?
That was member Clausen and member Marsh.
Oh, yes, Mr. Cook and Mr. Clausen. Mr. Clausen.
And I would move that we accept those minutes as well.
I will second that. All in favor of accepting the minutes? Thank you very much. Next item of business is adjournment. Can I have a little motion to adjourn this meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the Town? Moved by Mrs. Marsh.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning this section? Carried. Thank you very much. Hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Christmas.
Thank you.
And good health. Health, the key.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie, I just want to make sure that you have no